You've landed at Spark Launch, the guide star for embracing what it means to be neurodiverse. I'm Mike Cornell, joined by CEO of Spark Launch, Chaya. Here, we navigate mental health triumphs and tribulations from all across the spectrum, charting a course through the shared experiences that unite us, and discovering how to embody the unique strengths within neurodivergent and neurotypical alike, igniting your spark and launching it into a better tomorrow. Hello there, I'm Mike.
I'm Chaya.
And today we're joined by Reid Miles, host of the Acclaim podcast Inside the Asperger Studio. Reid is a passionate autism advocate who transitioned from the tech industry to create a multi-platform presence dedicated to neurodiversity awareness. His work spans podcasting, YouTube, blogging, where he shares both his personal experiences and facilitates conversations with others in the community. Reid's honest, insightful approach, which I'm a big fan of, has earned his podcast recognition as one of the top autism podcasts, and he's become a respected voice in autism advocacy. When not behind the microphone, Reid continues to build connections through social media and guest appearances on other shows dedicated to neurodiversity. Welcome to the show, Reid.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Chaya. It's good to be here.
Welcome, Reid. I'm from the tech industry as well, and so is Mike. So I'm just curious to learn from you what you've experienced in the tech industry and with neurodivergency, and also why did you move from tech to being a podcast host, and what was that burning desire that was within you to share and have guests on your show?
That's a very good question, Chaya. What happened when I first started out as an IT tech, believe it or not, everybody where I worked at it was Corcom at the time, and before that it was MexINet. They were an internet service provider, and everybody I worked with, it was a very neurodiverse range of bunch of people. I mean, you had every disability you can think of. You had different ethnicities working as tech. And what happened was they got bought out, and then the sister company had bought them, and then they're like, Chicago's too expensive for us to have an office here anymore. We're going to move to someplace cheaper. So they moved out of state, in a sense, dislocating over 9,000 employees. So I was left scrambling to find work. I could not find a job if my life depended on it. And I did everything I could. I got 2 degrees, both in the IT industry, thinking it would help. I have a bachelor's in information technology. I have a master's in computer science. Nobody recognized those degrees as, oh, he knows what he's doing. Let's interview this kid and see if he knows what he's got, if he's got the goods. Nobody ever thought about that. So what happened was I just started trying to figure out what to do with my life. And one day my mom's like, you can't just sit at home doing nothing. I started volunteering. Volunteered at 2 different museums and was let go from 2 different museums because they didn't know how to deal with somebody like me. The volunteers just did not know how to work with me. And my mom is like, you have a vast knowledge and experience. You've done things most neurodivergent kids have not done. You've gone across the ocean to school to get your master's. You've traveled for Europe. You've done so much. Why don't you start blogging? So I started a blog, but my blog wasn't getting much traction. I was looking at the numbers, and I would hit about 100 people subscribe to it, and the numbers would start to drop. And then I realized half of the emails were not real. People were using phony email addresses, other people's email addresses. And I just put up a message saying, hey guys, if you want to subscribe to me, don't use your email, just bookmark my page and come back every so often to make sure. But my blog never took off. And then one day my mom's like, why don't you try podcast? And I sat down and I tried to do it on my own. And I felt this tightness in my chest. I kept hearing myself breathe when I would listen to the recordings, and editing. It was driving me nuts. And I went to my life coach at the time, and I'm like, well, what am I going to do? I can't do it. I can't figure out how to do it by myself because I panic. He's like, try bringing on a guest. Because when you have a guest, then you're bouncing ideas back and forth, and they're professionals, so they have more of an input, and then people can relate to that input. So my first guest was a mother of two kids who were autistic, and it was just straight conversation. And it just went on from there.
That's amazing. So you had a lot of negative experiences, challenges, which you had to go through, and then you had success,
Yes.
right? So that's one thing that I want to point out is as we know, success does not happen overnight. And we have to ride the wave because in the wave, we learn a lot of things that work for us and that don't, the gems in experiences. So kudos to you to have actually taken action towards these different aspirations. Because a lot of people, they have ideas, they just don't take action because of maybe fear or whatever that is.
Yeah, it's true. What a lot of people don't realize is it's hard for us as autistics to find work, to find what we're good at. I have a really good friend of mine who's one of the biggest advocates in autism out in England. And I have another friend in California, and he was having problems finding what to do. And I go to my friend, I'm like, what do I tell him? He's like, tell him to find what he's good at, keep doing it until someone recognizes it and wants to pay him for it.
Yeah. So you talked about the interview process because you liked technology, you were good at it, you had masters, and then you went to all these interviews, but you were not successful. So what happened there?
I don't know. I don't know if it was I just didn't have the background they were looking for. A lot of times I would go on an interview and it would be with a temp company, and the guy would go, you got the great credentials, but the problem is you haven't been current in that field long enough. They want somebody who is still current, who's fresh. And I've been looking for work, say, a year or two, and they're like, you haven't been current. You're not working in this field. They want someone who's freshly working in this field that they can rehire. I'm sorry, but we can put it out to them, but there's no guarantee they'll hire you. And so it was just, and then it just became nobody ever called me. I got no calls for interviews. I got no nothing. It's like I'm not going to sit here waiting by the phone waiting for a company to call me.
It always goes back to chicken or the egg, right? Like,
Yeah.
to be able to work in the industry, you have to hire me so that way I can actually be actively working in the industry. But if that's your reason, you're not going to hire anybody at that point.
That is, Mike, that's exactly how it feels, the catch-22. If you want to be in the industry, you got to work in the industry, but to work in the industry, you got to get hired by it. So it's a round and a round circle. It's like, how are you going to, it's catching a break is what it is. You got to get that company to say, hey, I'm willing to hire this autistic kid because I feel like he knows what he's doing. But nowadays, companies are very picky who they want. They don't want to have to train somebody who's new. They'd rather hire somebody or move somebody.
Yeah, exactly. And when it came to working in the museums, what were some of the barriers you faced regards to, I guess, probably a lot of ways socialization, regards to the other volunteers and how they took to you?
Well, that's it. Well, one of the barriers was I have spatial issues. I don't know when I'm crossing that personal barrier of another person. And one day I remember I'm just doing my thing with a couple other volunteers. We're at a cart, and my supervisor comes up to me, goes, "Can I talk to you?" And she's like, "I'm like, sure." She's like, I've been getting people coming to me saying you're standing too close to them. And I go to her and I'm like, why don't they just tell me personally? Why don't they just tell me face to face? And she's like, nobody likes confrontation. And I was like, okay. I'm like, but both of you know we work better if you tell us one on one. You tell us right there and then we correct that issue. They don't know that. So coming to me a week later about something that happened 5 days ago doesn't help me correct that issue. It just makes me feel like, why? Why did you wait so long to tell me?
Yeah, communication is a huge problem, right? Everywhere, and giving feedback once a year or a week later is not going to help what has already happened. I wish everybody was more straightforward
Mm-hmm.
than just hiding information. I've seen that myself. And so you'll have to start guessing why people are not telling, and then you you just see it play out, and it feels ugly. I wish people were more honest and more brave to just tell what they feel. It would help them and it would help us.
I mean, what's funny about that, Chaya, is I literally sent them a email with a website with things about how to work with somebody who's autistic. And I guarantee you they looked at it and just deleted it. I tried to help them, but it just went to the wayside. It's like when it's like, well, why should I bother?
Yeah, and I like the key there. You tried to help them. The onus was on them. They chose not to accept that and not to utilize that. The whole people don't like confrontation thing. That's always so interesting to me because I mean, who likes confrontation? Nobody likes confrontation. But I find this is purely really an holistic thing because anybody on the spectrum is very straightforward with other people on the spectrum. We're very blatant and you can understand the lack of rudeness, and we don't actually have a lot of confrontations with each other, arguably. When you say, well, telling you that would have been a confrontation, that shows where the other person is coming from, that they expect a confrontation and that they expect the only way they can convey their need is through confrontation. Once again, that's not on you. That's a failing of the other person not handling their crap. Is really what it comes down to. And then you get caught into it because, well, stigma is all it really boils down to.
And what annoyed me is the second time I got called in, they make you feel like a child because they make you sit in the corner or sit somewhere on a test and they sit opposite you and make you feel little. And one of the things that really aggravated me was when I came back after that second time and I got in trouble again for the same reason. The one woman goes to me, I was hoping you would learn from your experiences. You would have changed. And I'm thinking, I'm autistic. I can't change who I am. I can't change my behaviors. I learn from my behaviors, yes, but I can't change who I am. You need to help me change.
Yeah, and you're not offering any sort of solution or ways to work with this that is being made a problem by other people because you've been very straightforward with, hey, these are issues I have, so this happens. It is not intentional. It is not, there is no meaning behind it necessarily. So they're not getting that. They're not choosing to accept that very clear information and then blaming you for it.
Yeah, I mean, it just felt so wrong. And at that point, it was when my mother said to me, you got so much, why don't you share your wealth of knowledge with the world? And that's when I started to blog and podcast. And then it just took off.
Yeah, it's not worth being in a toxic environment. Absolutely not. Whether it's work or personal friendship, it affects us a lot. And I personally can feel the toxicity, even if it's not in words, right? And I simply cannot be there. It's impossible. And that lack of empathy is just so sad that people should learn how to love. It's so sad that we even have to talk about this. Love is it should be natural. It should be natural to understand each other and work with each other, right? But to talk to someone and say, hey, learn how to love, learn empathy is just heartbreaking. And I can't believe that. I feel everyone is like me and everybody should have empathy, but it's not. It's just not. The world is not like that.
I mean, what's funny is when some people say we lack empathy, that's so wrong. We do have empathy, but the thing is we carry our emotions on our sleeve. We are very emotional. That's why little things trigger us emotionally. We can watch a TV show that affects us and people would look at us weird. Why is it affecting you and why are you crying during this? Because our emotions are on our sleeve. We're too emotional. We care more about what we do and who we are with. That's why they always say when you find another autistic friend, you hang on to them for life. They become your friend.
And it's okay to be emotional, right? It's the way we are made. Just because somebody is not, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be. And there's so much beauty in emotions, because that's how you create anything. Like the podcast is not because you were not emotional, it's because you have so much of emotions. So we can do a lot of things with emotions, and our growth is definitely the regulation part. Emotional regulation is huge, and that's where I feel we should learn how to work with that and use our emotions in a powerful way.
I mean, it's funny. I had an interview long time back with Dr. Grandin, and I asked her, "What do you say to those who say we lack empathy?" And she's like, "It's the total opposite. When those of us who are very empathetic do better at what we do on our job, we care more about the things we do. That's why you have people who can look at something in their job and do it 100% to those who aren't like us, who don't care as much about what they're doing. It
It's
makes us
true.
a better person."
It's
Exactly.
true.
Yeah. And ultimately, I think that the people who long ago decided we were not empathetic, it was just a simple projection of them not being empathetic towards us and what our challenges and what we're going through and how we interact with the world and how we think. And they butted up against that and decided they're not empathetic towards us, so we're not empathetic. Because I mean, find any neurodivergent person who's not filled with empathy and is not attached to things. I'm empathetic towards inanimate objects, and that happens to a lot of people. I made a joke 1,000 times, but it's 100% true. Where it's like I have a couple of pens and pencils like on my desk right now, and if I use one over another too often, weirdly makes me feel bad. Like, which doesn't make it, which I recognize doesn't make any sense, but it feels like, oh, well, why am I not giving the use of what this object is for to that object, and I'm using another one over it? Like, it feels like I'm unbalancing the universe in some way by doing that.
What's funny is people don't realize it, but as you start to watch in the world, as our nation starts to evolve more and more people are coming out being autistic. More and more people are realizing they're autistic. I mean, I've talked with parents who said during the testing of their child, they realize, oh my God, I have the same traits as my child. I need to get tested too. And then it turns out that the parent is autistic, and that explains all their little idiocies and all their little behaviors in life. We are going to be the ones who are going to become more than the neurotypicals.
I completely agree. I think the truth of like the entire history of the world at this point is that we have never really been the minority in regards to
Mhm.
humanity. Is all holistics have made the rules a lot, and I know this sounds like a them versus us sort of thing, but also when you have kind of a war on empathy, it's hard not to feel that way. But a lot of the rules were built because, well, we're not really made as well to be in a power position to make those rules. So others made the rules that aren't really compatible with the majority of the world population. And that, I think, has kept us in a very neurodivergence in a very rough cycle, but also society at large in a very rough cycle that we've been unable to break out of because, honestly, the world tends to punish people who are empathetic, who do feel deeply about the world and do feel deeply about those around them. And that tends to be us.
And the funny thing is, probably one of the few autistics out there who refuses to mask. I believe we should stand out instead of blending in with society. Why should I have to fake who I am just so you out there can feel comfortable with yourself? Why can't I feel comfortable with myself being who I am without being judged by society, being judged by the workplace? We need to make the message clear that we are humans just like you and I. Why should we have to change? Why can't you change for us? Because we are different. We think differently, but we're the same inside and out.
I agree. We absolutely should not mask because it's uncomfortable. And how long can we keep that, right? And that leads to burnout, and
Mhm.
it's just taxing. So there's no need to mask, and that authenticity is what speaks louder. It's and if we do our work, putting our authenticity and our emotions, all of that, and align ourselves to our natural self, we will be able to do meaningful, impactful work on this planet.
I mean, it's true. I mean, I've talked with countless people who are autistic, and they're like, when they come home from work, they're exhausted. They need to hide in their room and not speak to their family for 40 minutes. They need to sit in the dark room. I mean, that's why all these inclusive rooms are for, is so we can calm down from being held in, from being who we are. I mean, the best example of what it's like to hide who we are, I read, was, imagine a child being sent to school, a mother sending their child to school right out of the shower. They're wet. They throw on their clothes. Their clothes are inside out. It's itchy. It's noisy on the bus. And then what happens? They get to school and they have to hold in who they are and deal with all the noise. They come home and they have this meltdown. It's because it's sensory overload. And that's what we're dealing with every day, and why we're exhausted is we're dealing with the sensories of the world and we can't handle it. And people don't understand that.
It makes me wonder how much of what we've, even in pop culture, viewed as laziness, quote unquote laziness, throughout decades and decades that we've seen portrayed has literally been just neurodivergence in burnout mode, and not being able to handle things the same way an autistic would, as far as overload and sensory impulses and emotional regulation, and how burned in that is for what so many people view as lazy or not, not working hard and all that crap that we maybe put way too much onus on. And how long ago that kind of started and has demonized the ability to re-regulate, to get needed rest. Of course, I mean, the entire working system is, of course, broken, and holistic and neurodivergent alike don't get enough break from that. But a lot of neurodivergents need to unwind by, locking themselves into a room for an entire weekend playing video games or something, however they choose to regulate. And what is like one of the most common things that are displayed in popular culture as a form of laziness or slackerism is locking yourself in a room and playing video games, and intaking that stuff is harmful, because then, well, like, that's how I like to regulate. But the universe is telling me what I'm doing is wrong, and I'm a certain type of person, that I'm actually kind of seen as evil to the rest of the world for doing like my own personal needs. And the more we intake that stuff, well, it's then just the act of doing our regulating activities takes up more energy instead of giving it back to us, because that stuff's going in the back of your head. Like, you can't really turn those thoughts off. Like, oh, what I'm doing is seen as wrong. Like, I need to feel bad about the fact that I'm doing this.
I mean, what people don't realize is when we play a video game, it's not meaningless. It's our way of escaping reality. And it comes down to that same old question of every parent is, why is my child better at a video game than he is at his own work, his own homework, his schoolwork? It's because feel so pressured to learn this material, and our minds are so packed with everything from every day that when we enter this fantasy world, our minds are free. We focus on what's going on, where we let everything else from the real world go, and we absorb this fantasy world, and we become part of it. And that's what makes us good at it.
Exactly. It's such emotional investment and world investments and sensory investment. Honestly, like, those things become familiar to us, and the more things become familiar to us, the more we're able to relax around them. And it does take the pressure. The pressure of playing a video game is completely in our own control, because we have the ability to, we can just turn off the game at any point. Like, I can just choose to stop caring about this at any point if I get angry or whatever else, and move on to something else. Pressure of schoolwork, well, that's so much in external pressure. And we don't have control over how we're supposed to interface with it. We're being told how to interface with the coursework, and that causes us to fall behind, because we're not only trying to learn what it is, we have to try and figure out the system we're being given simultaneously. We have to learn a system and then apply the system to work. That is like just completely broken up and down, like no matter what purview you decide to look at it from. But as far as neurodivergency goes, it's really just setting us up to fail. Like the whole idea that we're not good learners, which is, you are walking proof that is the exact opposite of anything. I mean, it's like nonverbal autistics that are seen as like, oh, well, they must be, special needs or else they have a learning disability. And then you actually, give them the ability to speak through devices or whatever else. And, oh, no, they are incredibly well-spoken, incredibly intelligent people. They just have a mind-body disconnection. And, and they're not given the ability to go out and learn in a specific way that is appropriate for them and then can help them. It's always square peg, round hole. And if you don't fit, well, screw you.
I mean, it comes down to the age-old thing of is that we must be not we're not listening if we're not focusing on your eyes. And it reminds me of a guest who told me a story about he was giving a lecture on relationships and friendships to a bunch of autistics at the JCC. And then afterwards, he goes to the woman that set it up, and she goes, "How did it go?" And she's like, "Awful." He's like, "Why?" She's like, "None of them were looking at me." And she's like, "You're wrong. They may not be looking, but they were listening with their ears. They heard everything you said, and they were impressed. Just because we're not looking at you doesn't mean we're not listening. It's
In
the
fact,
way
I
our
think
minds work."
I think we listen better when we're not looking,
Yeah.
right? Because it's less distraction and less sensory things happening, and so we can actually focus on that. So all these rules should be taken away because it's not serving us, it's not serving people. And I remember in school I was always doodling or looking away, and I probably was listening, but then the chalk would hit me because the teacher would throw the chalk at me, and then of course my emotions would take over, and whatever little bit I was learning was gone, right? And listening. So yeah, it's the rules.
I think society is broken when it comes to learning about us because I feel they don't want to learn about us because we're different than everyone else. We're just one form disability, people with disability that think differently than everyone else. So they feel, why should we care about these people? But yet we're the same as everyone else. We just think differently. We think more outside of the box. That's why we're so good at what we do in our jobs.
I think we should move ourselves into positions where we can express our out-of-box thinking. And that's why I think neurodivergent people make better entrepreneurs and leaders, because you need freedom to do the out-of-box, right? And then, yeah, so we have to take ownership in ourselves and give ourselves freedom, like what you did, Reid. You created this podcast where you can express your out of box thinking, speaking, all of that. So I think I'm calling for people to be brave, to go after what they want to do.
That's what most people should do, is they should stand up for what they want to do and not feel like I have to conform to society so I can get this job. If you can't get that job, it just means that that company is not right for you. It's the same thing with dating. If that person's not going to accept you for your quirk, for your stimming, and they look at you and say you're acting weird, then that person's not for you. You need a job and you need a companion that will accept you for you.
And a lot of times we think we cannot find that, right? I was there myself. I'm speaking from personal experience because I was under the assumption that particular position, that particular job was it. And of course there were constraints with me having to drive to pick up my son from school and things like that. But I put up with a lot of toxicity, and I didn't have to, right? And then I was brave enough to move somewhere else, which was amazing. And so I see that if we embrace our own out of box, our own problem solving skills that we all have, and embrace that courage that's in there and claim it for us, we'll get it. instead of expecting others to come and understand us, because some people will never understand. They might never understand in this whole lifetime. So just take ownership.
People need to understand us. I mean, I've always said there needs to be a manual how to understand the autistics, how we think, how we interact, what stimming is, why you shouldn't stop us from stimming, why we are good at what we do. And then, I mean, that the funny thing is you're going to come across two types of autistics. You're going to come across those who are so good, who are just straight autistic, who can get a job, hold a job, and do good at it. And then you're going to get those who have AUDHD, who have ADHD, where their focus is all over the place and they can't hold a job. And that's where I fall in. I have AUDHD. I can't absorb anything you tell me. I can hold it for a short time and then it disappears. I can remember things from the past, but I can't remember my own education when I went for my master's. I can't remember any of that material.
And going into that some more, what are some ways you've kind of worked with that to exceed elsewhere?
Memory, writing things down helped me a lot. If it's something important, like remembering a doctor's appointment, remembering a birthday, write it down. My mother has always been a big proponent of not using anything electronic like her phone to remember birthdays. She writes it down. I mean, I used to be so bad at remembering phone messages, like when someone would call for my parents or my mother, and I would remember it in my head and I'd say, okay, remember to tell them this. And then I'd space out and forget. And then the next day that person would call back and say, did Reid tell you I called? And I would be like, oh crap, so-and-so called. And my mom's like, why didn't you write it down? And I'm like, I forgot, my mom. And she would say, you need to remember to write things down.
I think we have to come up with our own methodologies to help ourselves. There's no way I would remember anything like that because I would be so hyper focused on something else and it's going to escape my mind. But if it's important, I know if it's important for me or somebody else, it's worth taking that trouble to write it down or whatever methodology you have. I put messages in my alarm, on my phone alarm system, which is silly, but it works for me.
Yeah. I remember early on in my show, I had a woman who had ADHD, and I asked her, how was with racing thoughts going through your head, how do you keep track of what's important and what do you do about them all? She's like, if it's not important, I let it go. But if it's important, I'll pull out a pad of paper and a pen and I'll jot it down. And then I'll go back to it later. And if it's something that's really important, I'll keep it. If it's something I can file, I'll put it away.
And it kind of sounds like this is something that's potentially cool about doing podcasts or blogs is you create this archive for yourself, kind of yourself that I don't know if do you find that that stuff cements things in your memory a bit more?
It kind of does because I'm a visual kind of thinker. And for me to hold something and understand something, it's got to be visually taught to me. You got to show it to me. You got to sit down with it. So I remember my guests because I sit there and I spend the time. I spend the time writing down questions. I spend the time researching them. I remember I went to a podcast, my very first podcast conference, and I'm sitting down listening to one of the speakers, and he said something very important, and that is a guest can hear if you care or don't care about them in the tone of your voice. He said, if you're going to have a guest, do your research on them so you know about them and so you're not bullshitting them because a guest can tell when you're bullshitting them. And at that point, I'm like, he's right. You got to do your research on every guest because you got to know what they're about and you got to know what to talk about.
And from just going into your podcast a little bit more, what was some of the earliest meaningful feedback you received when you started it?
Oh God, I had one of the most shocking ones I got was it was on my blog because I link my podcast to I put my shows up on my blog as well. And I got this message from this kid who goes, hi, my name is so and so. I have autism as well. I have stage 3 colon cancer, but I'm not writing about me. I'm writing about my sister who is also autistic. And my father and his family are not letting her outside because they're afraid of letting her experience the world because they're afraid they'll take advantage of her. But after listening to your podcast, I'm gonna let them know that there's so much more into this world, it's okay to let her outside to experience the world. And that just took me by surprise that someone would listen to my shows and realize there's so much more to this world than your own house.
And that's how powerful our voices and our gifts are. And you making an impact on just that one child at that moment will have a ripple effect, right? And that's the kind of meaningful impact we should all be doing. And we will be rewarded for it. And unfortunately, the world always looks at rewards in terms of money, and we should allow ourselves to accept different kinds of rewards. And when you do it from a place of authenticity, it is so fulfilling. There's a sense of purpose.
I mean, that's why one of the reasons I wrote my book about stepping outside your comfort zone. It's something that's never been done in the autism community is sharing your life because we're so private. We don't want people to point fingers at us. But I figured if I'm gonna share my life with the world and let them know what it's like to be autistic. To see, hey, I'm just like you and me, but with the important message of you got to step out of your comfort zone because there's so much more to this world. If I did it, you can do it too.
Yeah, and we both live in bubbles put there by others, and we also create our own bubbles kind of within that larger bubble, and forget that there is stuff outside of it, and there's stuff outside of it that can work for us, or we could work for. I mean, that's a wonderful story, and I get the mindset of we want to protect this person. Like that is completely understandable, but I think there is always like that butting up with you can't protect somebody by shutting them off. You know, that's protecting yourself more than the person.
I mean, the thing is, and people got to realize is the reason why we're so protective and we put ourselves in these bubbles is we live in such a negative world where it's negative, 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 and every negativity puts a brick in front of us until we get a wall. And it's about taking that wall apart and realizing the world isn't all negative. And one of the things I write about is your experience is an experience, whether it's good or bad. It's still something you did. You go into a restaurant for the first time by yourself. You may have had a bad experience with your food. It didn't come out the way you wanted it. So you don't go back, but yet you got to remember that's an experience you did. It's a check mark in the book of your life. It's a colored string in your tapestry. It's something you did to look back on when you're older and say, hey, I did that on my own. And that's why it's so important to pop that bubble, take apart that wall, and do things. And I say, you don't have to do big things like me, like go across the country to school. You can do small things. It's that first step is always the hardest step.
Yeah, and the getting out of the comfort zone should come from your heart, right? Not because somebody else asked you. So it's that desire you have, but the fear is keeping you in the box. And
Yeah.
and then when you just embrace that love, that curiosity, and just do it, irrespective of people's judgment. I think a lot of things go into why we don't do what we really want to do.
I think part of the problem is fear. I mean, people put this fear in us, and it's up to us to shake it off, and realize the world is not out to hurt us. The world isn't going to hurt us unless we let it. I remember when I was about to start to go to school, my mother and my brother are sitting there telling me, don't go into girls' rooms. Keep your passport close by hand. Watch out for pickpocketers. I had zero experiences with pickpocketers. I never got bothered. I never got asked into a girl's room. Nobody ever bothered me, and I had the time of my life. I had a couple of hiccups here and there at school. I write about one of the stories where it was during exams and I needed to unwind, so I grabbed my phone and my headphones. I walked this path down to this little apple orchard and I'm dancing and chilling out. And as I come back, I get stopped by campus security. And I'm like, can I help you guys? And they're like, well, people were calling in, talking about someone matching your description, saying they were acting erratically. And I'm like, nope, I was just de-stressing to my music. And they're like, okay, and they let me go. People need to realize everyone does their own thing at their own time.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I did not let that experience stop me from enjoying the rest of my time at school. It was one experience. It may have been a little bad and a little scary at first, but if I let it stop me, I would have stayed in my room and I would have never enjoyed the remainder of my time at school.
The tapestry of all things that could happen includes bad and good, like in equal measure of possibility. That's why I subscribe mostly to chaos, like the idea of chaos, which sounds like it would lean negative, but it doesn't. The whole point is it doesn't lean in any specific direction. And I like your restaurant analogy because it could go even deeper, which is like I've gone to a restaurant, tried something, didn't like it, gone back to that restaurant, tried something different and liked it.
Mhm.
And it's like, oh, so
Yeah,
it was just literally like I could have just then chosen to never go back, but I did,
yeah.
and it turns out I like most of the other things on the menu. It's all like there's multitudes in every little experience.
I mean, one of the things people are afraid of, and my mother's always taught me this, is when you go to a restaurant and you're not happy with your meal, don't be afraid to send it back and say something's wrong with it. You paid for that meal. You want it the way you paid for it. You want it to look nice. You don't want it to look like a mess. And I think a lot of people are afraid to do that, especially those of us who are autistic, because it feels like a confrontation almost.
Feels like we're rocking the boat, and
Yeah.
we don't like rocking the boat. And also we've been told that, like, well, we rock the boat too much and we really shouldn't do that. We're always told to make ourselves as small and kind of as invisible as possible, which reinforces the idea that we need to be to make other people more comfortable.
True.
So I did want to ask you about some projects you're working on. Particularly, I know you're doing a retreat.
Yeah. Me and the partner are creating a autism retreat for families from kids ages 13 to 26. We're working on the process. We feel it's something to give back to the autistic community. Something where you have speakers, you have fun, and where it's going to be an amazing thing.
I would love to do a retreat myself sometime. Like those always sound so cool, but I love the idea of doing this like specifically for families and creating really positive environments. It's also networking for them. Seeing that the world is actually more inclusive for them than it will first appear.
I mean, that's one of the purposes I want to have both parents and kids take away from it is that at the end of this retreat, you're going to walk away with a list of all the families that attended it, where they're from, their emails, their phone numbers, and their kids' names. And the kids will have the same thing. They'll have a list of all the kids, where they're from, their emails, and what their interests are. So say you want to find someone who's got your same interest that came to that retreat. You can go through that sheet, find them, email them, and say, "Hey, do you want to get on Zoom and talk? And we can talk about our favorite interests and just sit there and talk all night." And then it's not only that, but I want them to walk away knowing you're going to have a support group of these people. These will be your support group from now on. So if you have an issue with your child, you can go through your friend group and email everybody and go, "Hey, has anyone else experienced this? And can you help me if you have?" And that's one of the biggest takeaways is creating that support group for everybody.
That is amazing. Having a network of people is so helpful. And just finding each other through social media, through LinkedIn, has
Mhm.
provided me so much wealth in terms of connections. So what you're doing will have a lasting impact.
I mean, one of the other things is I want to give something for these kids. I want them to learn and have fun. I don't want them to feel they're going to some stuffy conference. We're going to have fun activities in the evening. We're going to have food, like snacks throughout the day. We're going to have fun chats. I mean, one of our discussion groups is going to be, what's your favorite interest? We're going to have something like speed friendship, like kind of like speed dating, but for both parents and kids, where you're going to spend 10 minutes talking with each other, with each person, and then you're going to keep switching till everyone's talked to everybody. So you know who everyone is, you know what everyone's like, and then you're gonna have a great time for the rest of the time they're there.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. Like I attend like a support group every week. I run one every other week. Those kind of environments really thrive for people like us. It's so important because we've been isolated from each other for so long, and the more we are able to compare notes and interact with one another, the more free we feel, and it gives a place to unmask completely, to learn that it's actually okay to not mask yourself, to not follow predetermined rules that are nebulous and arbitrary at the end of the day. And I think it's actually fantastic that you're doing that and using your platform to build that sort of environment. I would love to see more people go that way. And I really like, there are a lot of, like you said, there's autistic conferences and things like that that are, they're are kind of stuffy. There's not a lot. One of the, everybody's, I think every autistic person's favorite thing is learning about other people's special interests. And like, that's kind of the stuff that I want to see more often from these spaces is like, why don't we just get together and like, you get to tell me all about your special interest. I get to tell you about my special interest. And like, let's just exchange that because it's really, really fun to hear that from other autistics.
Yeah, I mean, the whole purpose is to let people come, families and their kids, and just enjoy themselves and walk away learning so much. And one of the biggest things I'm implementing in it is it's going to be a technology-free zone. It's going to be free of talk of religion, free of talk of politics, but mainly free of technology, meaning the minute you walk in and you start your first session, you either turn off your phone or you leave it in your cabin. You can only use it during lunch and dinner or any free time you got. Because I want the parents, I want the kids to be focused on what's going on. Because if we lead them on like a hike to a clearing in the middle of the forest to like quiet their minds and listen to nature and be able to identify every sound, we want them to be focused on where they're walking so they're not stepping or tripping over something or tumbling and pushing somebody down. We don't want them getting hurt.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful way to also teach, you take people in who aren't used to these sort of environments and you take them there and let them be completely present. It's a way to learn that there are possibly other ways you can regulate, other things you can feel like you attach to that can be calming, that can be part of you as a person. And, if you are distracted by technology during those moments, well, you're still half in, half out. You're not able to make those like little neural connections to things. So I really love that. How can people find more information about the retreats?
If they want to find more, they can always contact me at my blog or my podcast, ramiles@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to relay any information as it's going. It's going to be in 2 years from now, but it's a slow process. We're building things up. It's going to be a fun time for everyone that attends because you're going to be surrounded by like-minded people and like-minded parents. And one of the things you're going to realize is we're taking you away from the noise of the city, all the stimulation of the lights from the city, all the sound, everything. You're not going to feel overstimulated at all. And you're going to feel like one with nature. And that's one of the big things we want is to take you away from the stimulation of the cities you live in and to be able to come to this retreat and feel focused and be one with nature.
That's so cool. Before we start wrapping up, what advice you would, since you're such a moniker of storytelling and sharing your story with others, what advice would you give to other neurodivergents who want to also share their own stories?
Feel free. Don't feel free to express yourself. I mean, don't feel stifled by society. Start your own podcast, start your own blog. Don't be afraid. Don't let people put you down, saying no one's going to read it. I thought that in the very beginning when I started my blog. I thought no one's going to read it. It's just going to be this little blog out there. And I felt the same way with my podcast. And then all of a sudden I started looking at my numbers and they were just rising slowly. And you'll be amazed. There are voices out there. And I want you all to realize one thing. You're not alone in this world. There are many of us who share your journey.
Thank you. So I want to give you a little bit of space to go into promotion mode to direct people to your show and your blog and everything else. I know as a podcaster, it's easy to fall into that mode. So
If you guys want to listen to my podcast, you can always go to Inside the Asperger Studios, look it up on Google or anywhere. I'm on YouTube. Just type in Inside the Asperger Studios. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram. Anywhere that's a podcast host, you can find me. Feel free to email me. I answer all my emails.
awesome. And I'll be sure to include all those, of course, in the show notes as always, and direct everybody to your email. Thank you so much, man, for joining us. This has been really cool. I've been so excited to have you on as a listener of your show, and your brain is invaluable, to put it lightly.
Thank you.
Thank you for everything you do for the community.
Not a problem.
Thank you, Reid. Your journey has been very inspiring to me, and I'm sure for our listeners.
Thank you, Chaya. I mean, that means a lot to me. Thanks, Mike.
And for all of us here at Spark Launch, we will see you next time.